The theme of this series is to disrupt the certainty that I observe people having on certain topics. And the purpose of this, though, is to gain clarity. And that in the process of disrupting some of what we think we know or what we feel confident about, we can gain more clarity. And so it is the point of these discussions is not to be complete in our academic thinking around a topic, but to reveal some landscapes that we feel are worthy of more curiosity.
This is an interesting topic, though, because with positive deviance, we're kind of zooming out. It's almost a philosophy of all of the topics. Let's start with, what does positive deviance mean? Kind of how did it come to you?
Well, there's a few themes that are pretty critical in human growth and in human decision intelligence. And some of these are inspiration, innovation, how we develop intimacy and connection with one another, and how we develop connection with ourselves and with truth. And so I would say that these three in particular, intimacy, innovation, and inspiration, are, in my experience, tied to a kind of disruption in our experience in the moment, and a deviation, which is the word of deviance, but it's positive. So culturally and socially, to be deviant is understood as negative. To be a deviant in terms of a student or in terms of sexually or in terms of socially, right? But there's a positive deviance, which is you're deviating from a social norm. You're deviating from an expectation or a form that has been decided as a standard or even good. And so positive deviance is when we're deviating from a norm or from a standard or for something that we don't really question as the way things should be. And so a positive deviance is in that deviation, there's something that is disrupted. In the context of a positive deviance, usually those are the places where we're inspired. We're off the beaten path. We're seeing something different. A perspective is expanded or contracted. We zoom out or we zoom in, something that is outside of the norm and the typical. And that gives us different sight and gives us different access to experiences or to something that was invisible. And so that's how I came to it, is really in my quest for understanding inspiration and intimacy and how those landscapes are tied to innovation. How do we think differently? How do we come to original thinking? How do we create something in the world that doesn't exist yet in a particular way? And I think that positive deviance is a thread there, one of the many, but one of the threads is deviating from what the expectations are of ourselves, of others, society, in the particular domains of our excellence or the domains of our subjects that we're studying, and how important it is to be alternate.
So basically, like breaking out of the status quo and getting to a sort of edge thinking or approaching something from a different perspective. And the idea is that positive deviance is tied to furthering ourselves, whether it's like a new mastery of something or innovating in a new way or coming to some kind of original thinking. It requires us to approach whatever is in front of us, not from the typically accepted known aspects of it, but to deviate in a positive way to get to new insights, truths, knowledge, ideas.
To further what we're saying is that there's two ideas that are connected to positive deviance, and one is risk and then two is play. And so there's a way that we risk doing things differently. There's a way that we take risk. To back up to what I was saying earlier in terms of intimacy and innovation and inspiration, there's ways, particularly in intimacy, where we're being courageous. There's a courage to be different or to experience other in a way that is outside of our own bias or our own need. And there's a risk that we take in positively deviating from our own self. How do we become different than what we have been? That is a deviance. We're changing something and we're changing it in a positive way to be more expansive. There's a risk there that requires courage. And there's also a play where we don't need to take everything so seriously. Who's creating these rules anyway? Like, how do we have these standards? Who created these standards? Why do they exist? And why can't we play with the boundaries, the rules, and the limitations in multiple domains, internally in our experience of growth, like emotionally, relationally, and also externally in the systems and structures that society places us in. So play and risk are fundamentally tied to positive deviance.
What are the actual material that you would use to activate a positively deviant spirit towards something? That's what you're saying is where risk and play enter the scene.
Yes. One of the things that came to mind of how I'm positively deviant that I was kind of bringing my attention towards is how I expect humans to fuck up. I don't approach humanity with an expectation of perfection or of hitting the mark. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean that I'm inviting, the kind of negative behavior that humans have. It's just this position of most people navigate the world kind of expecting humans to be well behaved, to be respectful, to be blah, 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 blah. And I think two things are true here that yes, we have this space to believe and hope in the best of humanity. And I'm fully a proponent of that, of seeing the possibility and potential good in people. But then also in my intimate relationships, there is a space of freedom to where there is a beauty and a vulnerability and an intimacy that can be created when you give the people in your life freedom to be sloppy, to be inaccurate, to not use the best words, and to kind of to disappoint. And the question then remains is, okay, if this is the only or the main way of being, not good. But it is a deviation from how most people approach relationships, where it's usually binary, right? We're looking at some circumstance and ways of communication, and we're looking at here's what we need and here's what we want, and this is the way that it should be. There's an expectation there, there's a standard there, which is all good. But then also, can we allow our own humanity to fuck it up? And in that way, we give each other the freedom to where, oh, we can't really. In our most committed relationships, after we've done the diligence of deciding this person is worth it and this person is good, then there's a freedom and a commitment that's like, oh, well, you can't really fuck it up because we're human, and of course we're going to disappoint each other, and of course we're going to be sloppy, and of course we're going to hurt each other's feelings, and that isn't actually the point. And so let's give freedom for that. And then how do we repair? How do we notice when something doesn't feel good and bring it up? And how can we help each other and partner each other to continue our growth so that we're not only being sloppy and only having moments of selfishness or having moments of obliviousness that can be hurtful to each other, right? So the positive deviance here is a relational space as much as it is a workspace, like in terms of innovation. And that's a point that we always want to make in human decision intelligence, how all of these principles or these thoughts or these explorations apply in every domain of life. And actually, it's important that they are integrated into our relationships, not just our work, that our work and our relationships are the same thing because they're coming from us. We're the executors, we're the embodiment, and our practices need to be not just in work, but also in how we are relating and being with others.
Yeah, that's why we often start with examples about ourselves and encourage people to think about the places in their life where they can adopt positive deviance or whatever the topic is for them as an individual, even internally, and then keep going into the workplace, right? Like, because everywhere we go, there we are. But starting with the externals and saying, I want to repair this thing at work or that problem or that person is not really how this works.
Positive deviance isn't meant to be a rule. It's an invitation to look for and explore and play and take risks, but intelligent ones. Our self-expressions of humor or something that's maybe even profane, it gives us an opportunity to be disrupted in the world. Like if somebody comes up to you and goes, I fucking love your hat, are you going to be irritated that they used fuck? Or are you going to be like, that was just kind of a more theatrical, dramatic expression of their like. And, so the rule would be in this instance, like, oh, profanity is unacceptable. And that actually is disrespectful. Like that could be a rule that society has had in certain subcultures. And if somebody was to break that, they have a choice whether to take it personally and see it as actually according to that rule, that it was disrespectful and it was inappropriate, or can they go, oh, this person isn't existing inside that rule. It wasn't coming towards me as something negative and personal. It was an expression that was amplified by their use of profanity. And how much do we take that seriously? Or how much can we just enjoy it? That it's like, oh, okay, this person is bold and is using all the words to be expressive. And in this context, kind of worked and love it. And that's a silly example. But I do think that that is a simple one, that there are social rules around profanity and the use of profanity, and how we even talk about certain taboo subjects, like sex. I think that there's a place for positive deviancy that allows us to have fun and not take something so seriously. And in that kind of state of curiosity, or a state of not having so much attachment to what it might mean in a social cultural way, we can actually think about things differently. Like, oh, well, sex shouldn't be taboo. Certain, conversations maybe shouldn't be taboo, especially not every circumstance. Like, okay, certain circumstances, sure, not the best timing to bring up certain topics that could be intense for people. But how often is that really true? Like, how many contexts are we really needing to limit our thinking and expression and exploration and connection around ideas?
Yeah, I think the I fucking love your hat is a great example because it demonstrates risk. And obviously, like there's much bigger risks that we're talking about, the usefulness and utility of positive deviance. But this one, just in like a little gesture to kind of get people thinking about what we mean by risk and playfulness, this is the perfect example because that person saying, I fucking love your hat to you, they're taking a risk. They're demonstrating positive deviance. And you're going to get so much information back from the person that you said that to. I'm also really noticing how kind of the playfulness and playing the fool skill that we talk about in the pedagogy for human decision intelligence, it's really talking about the kind of intelligence and mastery that someone who wants to use play needs to have in order to land correctly. What a powerful skill that is in building bridges and building trust and credibility and working with new material and finding out what's in front of you. The reason I'm drawing that parallel is because I think the person wearing the hat who may be confronted with someone saying, I fucking love your hat, has an opportunity to reflect on what's happening within themselves. And this is where they can think about, okay, am I taking it personally? Am I bothered because of the social norm? Do I believe in that social norm? Like the whole point of all these conversations is let's take the time to think about it, deconstruct it, and decide if that's true for us or if something else could be going on.
100%. It's the biggest question of how can I deviate from the norms of myself, the norms of society, the norms of my subject matter, whatever domain of expertise we're living in. Where are the opportunities to explore in a deviant way that's positive and that isn't unethical or immoral? The point that I'm making here is that some of our words become moralized. And to be a deviant or to have deviance somehow has a negative attachment and has become a moral word. And I think that this is also a form of deviance, right? That words and meanings and definitions help us make distinctions and help us look at the world different. Like words are not just tools, but they're places where they speak us. Much of human decision intelligence is actually examining our words, our word choice. What is a more useful word? Or more often than not, how can we redefine the words to be what they more truly are versus what they have come to mean in society? And all of it is important, right? All of it is important in terms of an examination. But to be a deviant, I would say I'm absolutely a deviant. I mean, in every way. I'm not an immoral deviant. I'm a positive deviant. I'm looking for ways to do things differently, to have more original thinking, to process information in more expansive ways, and to give humanity more grace and space to be themselves. And also not so much to where I'm allowing others to mistreat me. So there is this both and that's also kind of represented in the two words that we put together, positive deviance. They can coexist. These words and ideas that can somehow be paradoxical or even confrontational with one another, they can coexist. And this is the ultimate metaphor for what it is to be human and to live in our world.
When we've gotten a lot of feedback about positive deviance because we use that word throughout our work on our website, and it's like that's the point. And then we invite people to sit and think about what do those two words together mean, because it reshapes the definition.
It's interesting to your point about how people are in reaction to certain words. And we kind of expect that when it comes to profanity. But what about words that aren't even profane? And this is something about positive deviant thinking, is that there isn't necessarily as quickly of one to one in our translation. So, what I mean by that is people might translate positive deviance in a way that's immediately either confusing or something that's triggering. A positively deviant mind wouldn't immediately go to a negative. A positively deviant mind would go, oh, interesting. This is kind of two words we don't necessarily pair. What could that mean? And it's not an immediate offense or immediate confusion. A positively deviant mind would consider with curiosity, shoot, I hadn't thought of that before. What could those two words mean together? And it's super logical. It doesn't require academic to consider what positive plus deviance means. And so that's always something that surprises me, is the lack of just taking 15 to 30 seconds to consider what two definitions combined might mean. We know what those words mean, so why is it so confusing? And it's only
Versus
confusing because you haven't thought about it. That's it.
yeah,
Just think about it.
exactly. Versus either rejecting it or automatically trying to give the feedback to like fit it within the social conditioned norms of language that other people won't be confronted by. And that is exactly the point, is to confront people's thinking and invite them into a critical analysis, even if they have to look words up. And then from there, I think the more that you start to engage with things that really are thought provoking, that's like how you build the skills of having a positively deviant mind. And then you can be the one to start to provoke. Like you hear something, you're like, well, it could be that. Or what if it was this complete other thing?
Yeah, exactly. That is innovation, is how can we twist this concept or idea or whatever to see it in a new way or put it together in new ways that haven't been done yet. The other thing to point out around positive deviance is so much of our work in human decision intelligence is about using words that people either don't fully understand or don't put in that context. That's intentional by us. It is an intentional positive deviance where we're deviating from the social expectations around words, around language, and around how we deliver and present our ideas. We're not here to present ideas in a more hand holding way or bite size way that can be easily digested immediately. We're deviating from that intentionally and making it a little bit more challenging and using words that people don't typically use for the intentional reason of having them connect to that word in a way that forces them to consider what the definition is and what it means and how to apply it. It's entirely intentional. And so we also get feedback around that. It's like, oh, well, I don't know what this means. This isn't clear. And it's like, is it really that unclear? Or is it that you're unwilling to actually consider what those words mean in this context? Yeah, it requires a little bit more energy and attention and thought. And that is fundamentally the point of being positively deviant. It's easier in play to be positively deviant without much thinking. But when in growth, typically, and particularly when we're using words and frameworks and landscapes, it requires us to think. And it's a confrontation, like even profanity. If someone is kind of upset by profanity, if they're confronted with somebody who's being profane in a way that isn't actually immoral or unethical or unkind, oh, that stops them. And now they have to consider that standard or rule that they have for themselves doesn't really apply in the situation. It wasn't actually unkind or immoral or unethical. And so now what does one do after having that experience and that interaction? And that is what positive deviance is to kind of disrupt and to confront us with a different way of thinking. And then what does that lead us to? Often it's more clarity and it's more nuance, and we become a little bit more contextual, and we exercise the mind to evaluate things with a little bit more intelligence.
Yeah, like when you're reading a paragraph of our copy, you should expect to feel like your mind is doing mathematical equations, because you're going to have to sit there, think about a word, and then add it up in the context of the new territory that it's being delivered in. And this is how our work in the way that we deliver it models the exact thinking that we're asking people to engage with. So, turning the conversation a little bit, I'm curious where this doesn't work or where you've experienced the most pushback or been flabbergasted or disappointed or frustrated.
No, I think that that's a really great question to return to. I think when positive deviance doesn't work is when it's actually not positive, right? When there's something that's unkind or insensitive, or it's not in the right timing with the right circumstance. So, and that's the way it is with everything in life. There isn't much that can't be misapplied. Something good that's misapplied or that's over applied can be destructive, not productive. And so, what positive deviance really is it's something that is productive towards kind of a recalibration or, a new understanding or a new experience.
Yeah. I mean, that's another link to the ideas around playfulness and playing the fool with comedy, where a joke absolutely doesn't land because the kind of intelligence or delivery or timing wasn't executed in a way. It can be like a mean joke or a really inappropriate joke where the comedian's taking a huge risk, but they haven't quite built the skills to deliver that kind of content, or it wasn't sourced from a good intent. So, same for positive deviance, where maybe they're trying to deviate, but it's not done with the right intent or with the kind of right skill, mastery, timing, evaluating your context, and it has the opposite effect. Doesn't land.
Yeah, and then the issue is that now if that happens, we have an opportunity to recover. We have an opportunity to apologize, to take responsibility for our lack of precision, and also understand how we could do it better. And so much of that is with the right intention, right? If we're being playful and experimental and we miss the mark, it's different than if we're trying to be a little bit malicious or passive aggressive, right? And so how do we determine the state of which something is coming from? And that's when we have to be honest with ourselves and honest with each other. And then that's an opportunity for growth. Like, oh, okay, here's what happened. I wasn't super aware of that, or you weren't super aware of that. How could we do it better in the future? How could we understand this moment to be a learning experience and then grow? And that is what repair is. And it's what taking responsibility is. In the actual definition of positive deviance, the point is it's addressing the things that actually are fundamentally not immoral and not unethical, that society or individuals are making it so.
That's a good aspect of this because, positively deviant thinking can be across all of these different domains, across all relationships, across all of the decisions that we make. But when you're reframing it, at least as a place to start, is to notice the moral words that we use, like that was
Yeah.
right or that was good. One time I remember asking you, like, do you believe that people are doing the best that they can? And you were like, wrong question in a way, like, because it applied a moral layer to what was happening.
Yeah, I love that. I think this might even be the juiciest part of the conversation around positive deviance is how we think through morality and ethics when that doesn't usually serve us. I believe in morality and being an ethical person, but those contexts are worthy of examination. And in our puritanical society, we have absolutely over moralized things and are creating ethical issues where there shouldn't be any. And so how can we become more intelligent in knowing where are the actual moral issues and where are they not, and being more honest with that? But the reason why humans tend to moralize things is because they can create rules that make their lives more easy. You don't have to think so much because, oh, if this is potentially dangerous or if you're going to potentially get in trouble over here or whatever, we'll just create a rule and that rule will keep us safe, or will make it much easier for us to navigate because we don't have to think so much and spend so much energy. And that's also, a great point to positive deviance is we're saying, no, actually, let's think about it more. Let's think about it more. Let's actually create lives where we're more thoughtful and we're engaging context and nuance that, yes, does require more energy, but it is a muscle just like any other muscle that when it gets worked, it gets stronger. And that's how we make our lives easier, is by building muscle, not by creating rules so that we don't have to ever lift anything. In terms of that metaphor, it's like we don't want to create our lives to where we never have to use our bodies so that they atrophy and become weak. That's a very difficult, hard life. But if we actually go to the gym and exercise and get strong, well, then walking around the world and doing human things are very easy because we have strength. Our body's strong. We can lift things super easy, There's no cost there. And so this is the same parallel here. What the invitation is let's actually think more. Let's get our muscle working more, and then thinking will be easier.
Yeah, override the algorithm. I do have an example that might help us unpack positive deviance, and it's that YouTuber Mr. Beast who has the Feastables chocolate company. I wonder if positive deviance is something that's being applied to him having a mission of creating a profitable $1 billion chocolate company that doesn't source cocoa beans using child labor.
Yeah, that in a way is a positive deviance from some of this super advanced capitalism. We're developing socially in certain places a positive deviance from the very traditional late stage capitalistic values. And we're saying, you know what? No, we can do better. Let's deviate from some of these structures, financial structures and expectations, and societal structures and expectations around the prioritization of money alone. And also, let's redefine what we are determining is success. Let's redefine, how we're making money and the prioritization of money. All of that is positive deviance. Really looking for where are the places that we could be taking more intelligent risks, and also where are the places that we could be more playful and take things less seriously. In our relationship, in our partnership, Chelsea, we do this all the time where we look at typically how work partners do things is this, and we regularly examine how we can do it differently based on what our personal needs are. And so much of the ways of being in some of our routines and our practices are fundamentally against the way that work partners work. And how we came to that was actually just prioritizing each other and what is useful to one another, and how we can help each other maintain and grow the meaningful things to us.
Using context, what's happening in our lives, each other's lives, and it always wakes up new ideas.
What typically happens is that there's agreements that are made that prioritizes the work or the company. And what is missed is that those prioritizations for the work require us to be productive. And so this is so common sense, but yet it's something we come up against all the time. It's like, oh man, they just can't surrender to this fact that humans are more productive when their needs are getting met, and when they're happy, and when they're rested, and when they're naturally motivated. And when that happens, their productivity advances to such a degree that they don't even have to work as many hours, right? So you and I have this in our understanding, which is in its own way a positive deviance, where we're taking in different data and realities that most people are rejecting, that most companies or entities or systems reject. And we've experimented with this, that some days we can work together for an hour or two and be just as productive or more when we work 6 hours together, just completely based on our level of energy, our motivation, being able to sleep well and exercise, whatever, or spend time with our family or whatever, right? Those things matter. It's a complex matrix. So, how can we understand the systems of one another, and the basic understanding of how humans work well in many ways is a positive deviance, especially from capitalistic ways or from systems that really push human productivity beyond what's actually healthy and creates burnout. I mean, this is so much in our conversations, in the workplace, but employers continue to refuse to give humans the care that they need to have high productivity levels. And so you and I have decided against that. It's like, oh my God, this is so obvious. Yes, it's more complicated, but not really, because the payoff is so great, right? The benefits are so much higher.
Yeah. And then when we have hot projects and exciting work, we're both super engaged, super motivated, super productive. And hopping on a call at midnight isn't going to lead to burnout because we're caring for ourselves in all of the other ways. So when there is an urgency, both of us prioritize it, and we're happy to do that. It doesn't feel like we're working out of our hours. And I know this is a privilege, right? That we can kind of set those working hours. But just to reiterate your point, like Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, that is not a human based rule. That is a very systemic rule that does not necessarily directly lead to human flourishing. And so companies are starting to wake up to this and giving some room and leniency, but mostly it ends up taking advantage of employees by them working more and outside of hours.
Yeah, I mean, another example is understanding that efficiency isn't what we think it is, that speed isn't actually as efficient as companies or systems have determined. And so, how did we come to that? I mean, one, it seems pretty obvious if anybody gives it any thought at all, but it is absolutely a deviation from what is accepted in our culture as a truth. And so much of a truth that it's prioritized, that speed is prioritized, and how our society defines efficiency is actually not efficient. That's so weird. It's an increasingly strange thing to evaluate and to determine over and over and over. That's like, wow, the teams that we work with, the companies that we work with, their definition and standards and measurements for efficiency turn out to be time and time again not efficient. How is this continuing to happen? And so one of the many areas of positive deviance is looking at how our definitions are not accurate, and how some of our connections, like speed equals efficiency, how that is inaccurate. So much of our work, and I wonder if, like, in almost every area of our examination and in the processing of human decision intelligence, isn't in some form, a positive deviance.
Yeah, engaging a mindset, a thinking style to deviate in order to gain new pathways, to find new roads, to get new ideas. I was trying to think of like, okay, what's an outcome that has come from positive deviance? And it's like it's a thinking style, really. I do remember like one specific conversation I had with a CEO who was really interested in our work, knew both of us, and had reviewed some of our materials. And we hopped on a call. And the questions that I was getting from the CEO were about like really typical ROI and like a capitalistic model. And it made me think, does he understand what we're trying to do? Because that's exactly what we're trying to break out of. So it was kind of like, wrong question in a way. And obviously, that's not towards him because it takes some thinking to understand how we're approaching our work. But it just reminded me that not everyone is up to speed with how to push against all of the systems that we live and work within.
That is something that we come up against regularly, is that leaders are so trained to use the same systems to solve the systematic problems that they're trying to address. It's entirely illogical. And people know this. They kind of intuitively understand this, and yet they cannot help that habit. It's like, if you have this particular problem, you can't solve it with the same system that is broken, because
That created the problem.
the system that created the problem is not going to, you cannot use it to solve it. This is not going to work, right? So, and we're always here saying, we're offering an alternate solution that's outside of the system that created the problem. And we have these leaders continually say, well, how can we measure uh, this solution based on the metrics that are creating the problem? It's like, bruv, we can't help you here. Like, do you hear yourself? Right? It's like,
Yeah.
we can't help you. And it's
It's a
just such
great
a
vetting strategy, though.
it's a great batting strategy, but it is comically, and I think tragically, a consistent thing that we hear. And it is such a deep rooted habit and a deeply conditioned way of thinking around the expectations and systems that people feel they're measured against. And so that's where it's coming from. What we found is that they're in a position where their work and performance is being measured by the system that they need to fit inside. So when they're looking for solutions, they have to find a solution that's going to establish them as credible and valuable, even though that system is the thing that is causing the problem and we cannot solve it using that system.
Yeah.
People still cannot take that risk and they cannot make those connections. But it is a fundamental risk to use a different system in order to solve a problem that their system has created. That is a risk. And most leaders are not willing to take it because of the political capital that it costs.
I want to flesh all the foundation that you've laid and actually apply that to something, because we talk a lot and it's never about the people who are in the field of HR. We talk a lot about how HR is charged with building trust with employees, but they are the organization that hurts trust with employees. The system that's creating the problem isn't also the system to fix the problem, and how we can apply a positive deviant mindset, because we have ideas about how to support and foster employee health, happiness, and productivity as a result, not the goal, but as a result, outside of the existing HR structure.
I think that is an easy one for people to identify with, because we know very few people that have respect and love for HR. And it's not the people who are running HR that are a problem, it's the system of HR, how it's been set up to protect the company, not the people. But
Right.
yet people who work in HR are put in positions to make the employees feel that they're on their side, but they're not. So the organization itself is hypocritical and compromises trust because it's a conflict of interest.
Which undermines its ability to be successful. I want to show how we can apply positive deviance to this system and show what another outcome could be. And it also demonstrates what a big risk that would be because it is really disruptive, but in a good way. And that would be to put legal, compliance, all of the aspects of protecting the company under finance.
Our provocative solution to this is to get rid of HR entirely because now it has a branding issue. We can't keep those two words together and maintain any kind of trust or confidence. So human resources as a phrase, as a division, as an org has to go away. And now we create two different ones. One that's finance, legal, compliance, which is all about protecting the company, has to be its own separate division and organization. And then there's a new entity that is not called human resources, that is called something else, that is actually advocating for individual people and individual employees, that does not have a goal of protecting the company other than we protect the company through making sure our people are healthy and happy and equipped and are growing. And this happens in other countries. France has one that the government is involved in, where so there's government that actually keeps the corporations in check. And so this exists, right? These are not original ideas. The positive deviance is inside recognizing the deep hypocrisy and the system that has created mistrust and is unable to be credible. And we can't keep using a system that is not trustworthy and that is, as a result, destructive to employee relations. So, how do we fix that? And how can we create something that is trustworthy, that is credible, that doesn't have hypocrisy or conflict of interest? It's not impossible. It just requires a risk in many ways. And then just to do it, just to build it. It's not that difficult.
Do you have any stories or anecdotes as you think back to conversations that you've had or clients that we've worked with where you could see people start to wake up to positive deviant thinking or to take on some of the deviance in the way that they're approaching problems, or maybe to take on some of the risk taking or playfulness?
Yeah, Chelsea, you say it. We did this together, and it was a huge way that coming together, creating a strategy that was positively deviant and how it worked in a big way, where you were able to solve your own problem without any help outside of us together working together, and then how that actually solved a company problem that they didn't even know they had, and how everyone won.
Where I got feedback from a VP that I wasn't a good leader. And so I took that feedback to the CEO and asked for their input, and they didn't agree. And so I took the opportunity of receiving negative feedback, being kind of like demoted and having my global team taken away from me. And because I knew what the company needed and I knew how the CEO saw the people needs, and the relationship that we had, this was all within 24 hours. I designed, titled, and wrote a job description for myself, and then took it to the CEO and ended up getting a promotion where I got more money, more stock options, a lot more autonomy and freedom because I was reporting directly to the CEO. And so, yeah, I mean, that was definitely not within any of the structures or systems that would have been allowable to just create a role and get the budget approved. But there was years of kind of sweat equity built into that move being able to happen. And it was because I had demonstrated the way that I was taking positively deviant risks in other contexts and other situations. I was problem solving outside the bounds and it was succeeding, meaning that I was winning, my team, the company, the projects were winning. And so I think it was like the year's track record before of applying positive deviance in smaller contexts, and success kind of followed me, I think, as a result, that when it came time for this big moment, I had built the credibility that once again, I'd be green lighted to solve typical problems in atypical ways.
Yeah, and the whole solution was positively deviant. And then your whole track record of success was primarily a result of your positive deviance. And so that's exactly what we're talking about here, is how can we create a state of being where we're intelligently working with and outside of existing systems and structures, both. Some of the things that get in the way of people being able to practice positive deviance is that it requires a risk and it requires skill, many different risks, right? If you are deviating from a norm and from an expectation, there is an exposure there. There's a kind of vulnerability. You have to have a lot of confidence and a lack of fear, a willingness to fail. And that is one of the definitions of risks, right? Like there's intelligent risks, but a really good risk, a really intelligent risk has a probability of failure. And so, there's dumb risks that just aren't very productive, whether you succeed or fail. But then intelligent risk, right? Like there's still a high probability of failure. And so you have to be willing to fail. And then the skills to navigate anything where there is no path. So that's a huge part of human decision intelligence, is helping people develop the skills to map new paths and to create new roads that don't yet exist. And once that's practiced, it's very easy to create strategies for oneself that don't exist yet, that aren't there, that people haven't done, or they're not even aware of. So it's skill, it's risk. It's not taking things so seriously, which is also kind of part of risk. Is like, oh, if I fail at this, or if I end up quitting or getting fired, who cares? Whatever. We keep going. That's a rare position to take, but also that's that very position that increases our success rate, is because there is a confidence there and a clarity of what isn't working and why it's not working. So all of this is skill. And then, yeah, it's emotional and intellectual and career risk taking, and it's worth it. But that, I think, for sure is the main obstacle.